Awesome. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So our topic for tonight is we're going to chat about executive functioning skills. So specifically, for those of you that are new to this topic, we want to just give a little bit of a brief overview of what we mean by executive functioning skills. There are 11, but we're going to really highlight 3 of those tonight. And our goal is to share with you some of the ways that we work on skill development at LAM in a Montessori setting, and then share some ideas of ways that you can continue this learning with your children at home. Okay, so what do we mean by executive functioning skills? So these are really kind of what it sounds like, the skills that we need to execute upon a task. So these skills go beyond academic success, and we're really talking about skills that are required for all learning, for work, for life, and for success in our daily living tasks. All of these skills kind of come together when we think about the success of task completion. And it really is the how of the task as opposed to the what. And so what we mean by that is a child might have all of those underlying academic skills to complete a task, but struggle with the how to do it. So where do I gather my materials? How do I keep myself focused on the task? How do I manage my time so that I can get the task finished? When do I know that I'm finished? All of these other kind of soft skills are skills that a child needs to demonstrate that academic competence. So when we think about executive functioning skills, you're going to see in the literature that some people say there are 3, some people say there are 5. I've been taught kind of this larger spectrum of 11 skills. And so those are response inhibition, so being able to kind of control my impulses, not act on that first thought or idea. Working memory, holding ideas in my head while executing on other tasks. Emotional control, again, kind of overlying with that response inhibition, so not acting on my emotions. Sustained attention, being able to focus on a task for appropriate durations of time. Task initiation. So how do I even get started with a task? Some of us might feel so overwhelmed by a big, large, daunting task that it's hard to even identify, what do I need to do first? Planning. So how do I create a concrete plan to execute upon a larger piece of work? Organization, managing all of the different pieces and materials responsible for completing that work. Time management. This is a big one for children and adults. Just how do I manage my time? Know that I'm using my time appropriately. Persist when things get difficult, or be flexible when there is some sort of barrier or challenge that is in the way of my original plan. And then metacognition. So how do I think about my own ability to execute upon these tasks? And as you might have guessed, as I kind of went through this list, these are skills that build on each other. These skills are located up here in the front of the brain, the frontal lobe. And we know that the brain develops from birth to 25. And so we are still working on some of these skills as fully functioning adults as we enter our mid-20s. So it is completely understandable that our children in primary and elementary school are working closer to the top of this list, right? At home, I'm sure you see a lot of those issues with response inhibition or emotional control and sustained attention. And so that's why we highlighted some of the first couple, working memory, emotional control, and sustained attention, as the ones that we're really gonna dig into tonight. So before we get to some of those examples, we want to show a short little video that I think is going to hopefully bring all of this into perspective. And this is an example of how we use all of these executive functioning skills, again, as adults, as we complete tasks in our daily life. So let's see if I can get to this video for us.
So let's go through a specific example and highlight how and where we utilize each executive function skill. So let's take grocery shopping. Now, maybe you love grocery shopping. Maybe that's your thing. You get out the house, you pick out your food. It's kind of not my thing. I don't love grocery shopping, but you got to do it, right? So let's go grocery shopping. First step is we have to plan. So we're using our executive function skills here of planning. Plan what store you're going to go to. Then we're going to use metacognition to organize our coupons or organize our list. You got to figure out what you got to buy. You look in your cabinets, you look in your fridge. Are we out of eggs? What am I making this week? You got to figure out what you're going to buy when you go to the store. Then you're going to pick a time to go when you'll have enough time to shop and get home using your time management skills. Now, if you have to be at work at 7:30 in the morning, you're not going to decide to go grocery shopping at 7:15, right? You won't have enough time. So we have to pick and plan a time when you will have enough time to grocery shop and get back. Then you're going to leave for the store. This requires task initiation. If you're at home watching your shows, you have to turn the show off and leave. Then, when you get to the store, you're prepared to park. You found a perfect parking spot right up front. You have your brilliant blinker on. You're about to turn, and guess what happens? Someone steals your parking spot. Someone sees you with your blinker. They swoop in. They steal your spot. But you're going to use emotional control to shake it off and move on. Even though you want to roll down your window and give them the middle finger and let them know what you thought about it, you're not going to, because it's not a big deal. And guess what? You're going to see them 3 minutes later in the store and it'll be awkward. So you use your emotional control. You know it's a small problem. You go park a few spots back. You're fine. Now you're shopping. You're in the store. You're picking out what you need. You use your working memory to identify the food you need while you're shopping. So you're multitasking. You're going through the aisles and you're looking at where you got to go while thinking of what's on your list and what you need to buy. You use your response inhibition to avoid indulging in things you don't need. Doritos are on 10 for $10. But guess what? You don't need 10 bags of Doritos. You don't. You use response inhibition and you don't indulge in the 10 packs of Doritos. And that's why they say, right? Don't go grocery shopping when you're hungry. Your response inhibition is lower. You adapt your list if needed using your flexibility. Let's say you get to the bread aisle and the brand that you always buy is out. You are flexible. You pick something different. You stay focused so you get home on time using sustained attention. You don't spend 3 hours, you stay on task. And then last, the very last step is so important. You put all the groceries away when you get home. Persistence. If you get home and you put all of your groceries on your kitchen table and then you go to bed and you wake up the next morning, what's going to happen? Some of your food is going to be ruined. Did you really accomplish grocery shopping if you did it to 97% completion? No. The point of going grocery shopping is to have food at your house to eat, right? If you leave all your food on your kitchen table and your ice cream melts, your milk spoils, your meat spoils, do you have that food to eat now at home? No, you don't. It's like students that complete their whole online assignment but don't press submit. You don't get the grade for it, right? It doesn't count. So we need that last 3%, that persistence of putting all the groceries away when you get home.
All right, so we're going to stop right there. Again, kind of a silly example, but I think really helpful to put all those executive functioning skills in perspective and really think about all of the underlying skills that we as adults rely on every day and that our children need to succeed in school, in life, in tasks at home.
Okay, so now kind of speaking to, of course, there's children that do have, we're constantly building up on these executive functioning skills. It's not something that just naturally comes to us. It's coming with our experiences. And so if we do not have some of these executive functioning skills, then it does create some deficits that could potentially make friendships hard, relationships hard. Also being able to follow simple directions that are given both at home and at school. And that could even come with things, I mean, I've heard several parents say, like, we do this every single day, and they're still not being able to get their backpacks and just go. So those type of things, those are those deficits that we're seeing. Following the school and community rules is another thing that you will see if there's challenges with executive functioning. The academic engagement could be affected. Of course, that comes along with our standardized testing results and informal and standardized. So completing work in the classroom and just being able to sit there and completing the assessment that's being asked of you. The other thing that is not as obvious, but is equally as important is if there's students or even adults with deficits in executive functioning skills, that can also affect your self-confidence of how you feel about yourself, because it may be that you're comparing yourself to, why is it so easy for other people to do this? And why is this so difficult for me to do? The other thing that comes along with some deficits is that because a lot of times, like for example, if you are so impulsive to do certain things, it might increase your risky behaviors. There's actually studies that do reveal that since students with ADHD a lot of times do have difficulties with that impulsiveness piece, that they may be more risky drivers. And so just kind of thinking about those things and just making sure that we're really speaking about we're going to be speaking about some strategies, but these are really real things that we do need to realize and we need to address. Okay. All right. So kind of thinking about this in the classroom. It's so simple to give students a simple direction. So the example that I'm using here is giving directions in the classroom. So if a teacher tells your student, okay, go do your work plan. So for those who are a little bit newer to the Montessori setting, students are responsible for going and planning out what works they're going to be completing. And so to us, it's just simply, if I see a student writing his work plan for the day, I would mark that as a success, right? But I didn't realize, so kind of think about this as an iceberg. We see the top, we see the direction that you gave the student, and we saw the student completing the task. But what you actually don't see, that I think is really important, is that it's not just writing his work plan. It's several steps that you just asked him to do. So you asked him to go gather his notebook, his pencil, his materials. He has to choose a spot of where he's going to sit to do the work, right? He also has to tune out all of those distractions. There's people that are walking by, there's lessons being given to other students, and also he has to check back to see what works maybe he has already received. Certain teachers already have kind of like a glossary of the lessons that they've delivered. And so that's an additional step. It's like, wait, have I been presented with this lesson? So going back to that reference is also an additional step that you could have asked that student. The student has to plan by themselves, what is it that I'm going to do? And also they have to be writing down the works that they're doing. So just making sure, not even only just writing, also making sure that, can my teacher read this? Is this on the line? Did I capitalize? Did I put a period? Those type of things also go into the writing piece. And also, we just asked them to do this all in a reasonable time frame. So that's an additional step that we're facing when we're asking students to do all of these things. So whenever I challenge you to, the next time that you give your child a direction, kind of back up and really think about, yeah, I just asked him to go clean his room, but what does that really mean? If I break it down step by step, what did I really ask my student to do? And so again, so what people expect, or what we're actually seeing this, let's say that a student did not complete that task. It may be that we might say, oh, that student just never listens to me, or they don't really care about their work, or they're not motivated. And I mean, I've even heard people say they're just lazy. And like, that's not the way that we want to perceive, children in general. I've heard this outside and inside, the school. So we have to be very careful with that in the way that we're perceiving students, because really it's not so much that, it's more that they're having just genuine challenges that we need to support them with and that we need to build. So just general things that of what we're not seeing, of course, is that challenges with the organization and planning, and then also difficulty being able to sustain that attention, and challenges with time management all come with what we're not seeing. And so Just to summarize really quick that portion of it, I think whenever we're, again, just kind of giving directions, really think about what is it that my student is having challenges with? Because one of the things that I will highlight that I think is wonderful about Montessori is that it does apply to real life. In real life, you're given a list of things that you need to do, and you get to choose in what order you're going to complete those tasks. So in a sense, we are preparing our students for that portion. And it takes practice.
So as some of you have probably already identified, these skills of executive functioning become even more challenging for our children that are neurodiverse. Dr. Barkley, who is a psychologist who have written some of these books that I've included here and many more on the topic of ADHD, has a lot of really fantastic resources shared online. And he is a big advocate for rethinking the diagnosis of ADHD, not as a challenge with attention, but really with a challenge of executive functioning. And so we're going to watch a little video of him kind of talking through that model and that way of thinking of the deficits and the challenges that our children who are diagnosed with ADHD have, as now with this new knowledge, a challenge with executive functioning.
I would want parents to understand something that the vast majority of the lay population does not understand. Self-control is not learned. It is not the result of your upbringing and how good your parents were. This is one of the most profound insights from our research on ADHD. ADHD, as we will see, is largely a neurogenetic disorder. But then let's pursue the implication. If that is true and ADHD is a self-regulation disorder, then self-control is largely neurogenetic in origin. That has a philosophically profound conclusion. The vast majority of variation in the people sitting in this room and their ability to manage their behavior is not from how they were raised. It is a part of who they are. It is a part of their neurogenetic gifts. And that is very stunning indeed. That our capacity for regulating ourselves is a neurobiological trait, not some socially learned phenomena that you just happen to pick up from your parents. So I would want them to know that ADHD, being a self-regulation disorder, is arising out of neurogenetic causes, and that this inability to direct behavior toward yourself comes from impairments in the following 5 executive abilities. And these have to do with brain development, not with training. It does not mean that training cannot enhance them. It means that they don't originate at the beginning in training, in the social environment. The social environment requires that they be there already, and then it will help to shape them to become more proficient.
So again, as a parent of a neurodivergent little boy, I think that's just such a powerful message to remind ourselves of, and to not just remind ourselves, but to continue to remind our teachers. As the example that Amanda just shared with us, we see what's on top of the iceberg. And with these invisible disabilities like autism and ADHD that don't present in a very visible way, we as educators and parents need to remind ourselves of the challenges that we don't see below the surface. And our children do have very real, very concrete challenges that we want to make sure that we respect. We meet them at the level that they're at, and we have really concrete strategies to teach them.
Okay, so regarding the statistics with ADHD, about 6.1 million American children have been diagnosed with ADHD. And so there has been an increase. There's been a 42% increase in the past 8 years of diagnosed children. So of course, like there's this talk of it being overdiagnosed, but I honestly think that it's more so that we have more information now. We know how to detect it. We know that this isn't just because the student is being challenging, it's because their brain works differently. And so speaking a little bit to what Alicia was mentioning as well, I think a lot of times parents also need to be graceful with themselves, because I've talked to many parents in all of the years that I've worked in special education, and unfortunately, a lot of times there is a sense of guilt within themselves of that they created this issue for their child. And I just want to reassure you that that's not the case. This is something that you had no control over, just as we don't have control over how tall we're going to be, or what color our eyes are going to be. So I just want to throw that out there. As far as, we didn't put the number in here specifically, but for autism, there is about 1 in 44 children that have been diagnosed with autism. So that's another highlight to some of these statistics. Okay. And so thinking about the statistics with those two diagnoses, because those are the ones that we're focusing on a little bit more today, is that with students who have autism, there's about 40 to 70% comorbidity with ADHD. So that means that students with autism likely would have some deficits with that come along with ADHD. So we'll see a lot of times, I've even, sat in some meetings where they're trying to tease it out, and it's not necessarily that we can tease it out, because a lot of these symptoms that we would see with autism are also present in ADHD. And so, as I mentioned, they're comorbid, they're working together, and they're creating some of these challenges for the students, which is what we need to help them with.
All right, so now we're going to kind of get into how we do that, how we help our kids. So first, specifically talking about what does this work look like in a Montessori setting. So one of the things that Montessori really prides itself is being education for life. So beyond just academic concepts, the Montessorian focuses on teaching the skills required for success at school, but also at work, in relationships, later in life, potentially as a partner or a parent. And researchers have indicated that there are real strengths in Montessori as a place that requires some of these executive skills and creates a lot of opportunities for practice, more so than you might see in a traditional teaching setting. So here are some of our amazing learners. And as you look at each of these images, kind of with this new understanding of what executive functioning skills are, I'm hoping that what pops out to you now is how many executive functioning skills are required for success in activities in the Montessori setting. So just using the example up here in the left-hand corner of the students using our movable alphabet. So right there, they're required to plan before they even start laying out any of the pieces. How much space am I going to need? They have to organize their materials so that they have everything that they need available to them. They're working collaboratively. This is something that we see a lot in Montessori. All of these opportunities for practice create skills. And so that's something that, as a parent, I was specifically looking for my child, a setting where he was going to be challenged to use these executive functioning skills every day. But I also want to name that, knowing that these are deficits for some of our children, there are ways in which the Montessori environment can be a bit of a double-edged sword, right? While we have a lot of opportunities for practice, we also have a lot of opportunities for struggle and a lot of opportunities for failure. And that's where the appropriate accommodations come into play, and all of that extra work that our teachers do to make sure that they're supporting each individual learner. So diving into the 3 executive functioning skills that we're going to talk about tonight, we first want to look at this idea of impulse or emotional control. So Amanda's going to kind of walk us through what it looks like as children or even adults are working on these skills.
Yeah, so some of the examples for the impulse emotional control for students may be that you're seeing that a teacher is giving a lesson and she asks a question. And all of a sudden, a student just blurts out the answer. They're so excited to share what they know instead of raising their hand, which would be the expectation. And raising your hand during circle time is an all day, everyday practice. But for some students, that's really hard to hold on to that answer and wait until you get called on, right? The other example for us as adults could be that example of being stuck in traffic and then suddenly somebody cuts you off. That would be being able to regulate yourself to not overreact or to make the situation even bigger than it needs to be. Some other examples would be that on testing, we see this, and in some cases, we're like, oh my goodness, that student didn't score so great on that assessment we gave him, but I know he knows the answer. A lot of times students just want to get it over with. They want to hurry up and just get it done, and they just start guessing or just start pressing buttons on the computer. We've seen that in the past. So I always say, like, be cautious of test results because to me, it's more so what are they doing the day in, day out? That's really showing me what they're learning. We talked about the raising of the hand, and then also, let's say that a teacher tells you, okay, we're going to do this activity. Let's say that she put a worksheet in front of you with some tissue paper, and she hasn't given you any directions on what you're going to do with that. But a student may just, oh, I have ideas for this already. And they start doing it on their own without waiting for the teacher to tell them, we're going to cut the tissue in squares, and then we're going to maybe mash it up and put it on the paper. They just automatically go. That could be an example of a way that we could see this impulse control deficit. And we see this one with pretty much all children whenever they're in their toddler stage. It's really hard for them to wait or to share, ask for something, right? So a lot of times with younger children especially, and sometimes even older children, if they are still continuing with that deficit, just taking something without even asking is a way that we would see this. Okay, so what would help with some impulse and emotional control? So one of the big things is to teach delayed gratification. So an example that I could give you for that, for us ourselves, is dieting. Let's say that I set a goal for myself that I'm going to go on a diet, but I see like this bag of cookies on the table. It's so much more faster for me to just grab a cookie and go than wait my couple weeks and start seeing some progress, right? So that is something that is even challenging for us as adults. I want to recognize that. So as far as for children, something that you could do with your child, let's say that they want to watch some certain TV show, but their room is a mess. You could say, well, first we're going to clean up your room, which, remember, that's multiple steps, so you might have to break it up. First, we're going to clean your room, and then we will watch the TV show that you want. So making sure that they do have to wait, because in real life, you're going to have to wait for certain things, and that's just a part of it. So the younger we start off, the better. Avoiding distractions. So if your student has to do homework, the best spot to have them is probably not in front of a TV where they're constantly looking at what's going on in front of them. A quieter space, making sure that they have, I would even recommend like a specific homework spot. This is the table that we use for our homework. So that way they learn that this is the spot I go to be able to focus on my tasks. The other thing is being on the lookout for warning signs and teachers' child to identify one of their behaviors or triggers. So if I know that my student gets really, really thrown off whenever there's a new adult or new teacher in the classroom, then it would be important for me to give them some type of heads up, like, hey, tomorrow your teacher's not going to be there, but this person's coming in, and you can just kind of talk through giving them that prep so they can look forward to it. And so again, these are just things that we have to learn. We're not always going to have a heads up. And I think also those conversations are important to have with your children too, of saying, there's times where I'll be able to prepare you for certain things, and there's gonna be times where we're gonna have to be flexible and just move on the go. And that's a skill that just simply needs to be practiced. It's not something that will come naturally, but just kind of after there's a situation that maybe the student did have to be flexible, then you can talk about it. How did that make you feel? Maybe, you know, next time that this happens, maybe we can address it this way, or we can handle it a little bit better in an alternative way. Something else that's really helpful for students is bringing weight tools. So let's say that you have to wait at the DMV and you brought your child with you and they're very, very tired of waiting. It could be that you could have like a timer and say, okay, in this amount of time we should be out. Or you can also have some type of fidgets for them to have in their hand while they're waiting with you. And so it's really important also just to make it meaningful for the younger children, especially. So with this next portion, just selecting a student-specific strategy, really tapping into what is my student's interest? What is it that they really like? Because our brain is wired for interest. Therefore, the strategies that our individual personality finds appealing or interesting it's more likely to work for me. So, for example, if somebody tells me, oh, Amanda, if you do this for this time, we'll give you some Harry Potter something, toys. I might not be super interested in it, but there might be another student that's really interested in that. So the important thing with this to realize is that you might need different tools after some time. You might be using some type of tool with your student, let's say fidgets, and after some time your student loses interest. This is just completely normal. So the important thing with this is that you remain with the structure that you've already developed with your student, but it may just be that the reinforcement is changed for your student. So again, just maintaining those consistent expectations and holding those boundaries. Students a lot of times might push back on those boundaries, but it's really important for us to really hold the line with them and teach them that, you know, I'm sorry that's upsetting you, but this is, you know, in the long term, you're really teaching them that skill of we have to be flexible. We have to learn that things aren't always going to go our way.
Just to add a few more to the idea of impulse control. So for any of these executive functioning skills, we want to have a conversation with our child about these as skills that we want to develop. Just like if we wanted to become a better runner or if we wanted to become a better swimmer, we need to practice. We can talk to them about, hey, I know that sometimes you get really excited. So I am going to help you practice your emotional control because I know it's something that you can get a lot better at. I know we can do it together. So being honest with them about these are things that we're working on. Modeling for your child how you're processing through things. So one of the examples I shared with Amanda, I know that one of those triggers for my son is crowded spaces. He gets a lot of energy in crowded spaces and doesn't have that ability to kind of pause and think through his actions. So, to be honest, I've lost him a few times in some crowded spaces. So I now know that when we pull up to a museum, you know, somewhere fun that we're going, and I see a lot of cars, in my head, I'm already thinking about my strategies. How am I going to keep him close? I need to narrate that out loud. So, hey guys, I see there are a lot of cars here. I know there are going to be a lot of people inside. Let's think about 3 things that we're going to do to keep ourselves safe. We're always going to be able to see mommy and daddy, and we're always going to be able to see you. You're going to stay close to me. If you hear me give you a direction, I need you to turn around and look at my eyes. Can we practice some of those? So that preview and practice across all executive functioning skills is fantastic. I really like the car as a space to be able to do some of these skills because I personally have found that in the car, we've removed a lot of distractions and I can get into some good conversation with my kids in the car. So we do a lot of that preview of new experiences when we're driving. Amanda talked a little bit about timers. I put here on the right the time timer. So this is an app that you can download. It is something that a lot of our LAM students are going to be familiar with because we have a lot of these timers at the school. Something that I love about this timer in particular is that it actually teaches the underlying skill of understanding the elapse of time. And that's because unlike other timers that you might purchase where the time goes from red to green to yellow without an indication of the number of minutes that are left, this timer, the child can actually visualize, what does it mean to have 45 minutes? What does it mean to have 30 minutes versus what does it mean to have 2 minutes? I found that my children, even though they're young, they're 4 and 5, they now really can conceptualize when I say, we have half of a circle to do this activity. That now has more meaning to them versus when I would say 30 minutes. The other nice thing you can do if you don't have a timer with you is when you're talking about the elapse of time, the end of times, you might want to use a concrete example for your kid. So for example, if you're giving that warning that we're about to go, and you know that this might be a moment that's going to trigger an emotional outburst, instead of saying we've got 5 minutes left, you might say, we have 5 minutes, and that means you're probably going to get 2 more turns in this game, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. Now that has a little bit more meaning, and I'm a bit more prepared to move on to the next thing. Again, please jump into the chat, jump off mute if you have other strategies. I have some strategies to share for primary kids from my own home, but especially would love to hear from any elementary or upper L parents about ways that you kind of use these things in your own home. And just to hit on like that idea of reinforcement, like I know that this is something that we talk about a lot with kids. Reinforcement doesn't need to be a big sticker chart. It doesn't need to be working for a huge prize. In fact, it's much better if we can find really small reinforcers. One example that I use in my house, actually I have to give the credit to my husband. He got these little gummy worms for the daily vitamin, and we call them our early worms. So if you have your socks and shoes on and your coat on, by the time that our 3-minute get ready timer goes off, you get an early worm. And something about that vitamin just being in a worm shape makes it like that much more fun and exciting. So think small. What are like those little reinforcers that you can leverage for those small things? So sustained attention is another one of these big areas of executive functioning that we see a lot of struggle for our students. So these are the kiddos that have difficulty finishing tasks. They forget maybe what they were doing. So I know I have one of these kids. I send him off to go get something, and 5 minutes later, he wanders down the stairs and he has no recollection of what he was even looking for. Getting easily distracted, having trouble staying on topic. This can show up in speech, or this can also show up for our older kids in writing assignments. We kind of, veer off from that focus of the task. Struggles doing multi-step activities and following multi-step directions. So as you can imagine, success in any classroom requires a lot of sustained attention. And so when children are developing these skills, we really need to think about what extra supports are they going to need to be successful. So one big one that we use a lot in school is chunking of assignments. This is something that you can also use at home. So I know we've talked about the example of cleaning your room. Even for me, sometimes when I look at my house, I feel so overwhelmed by how much I have to clean that I just go and sit down and start scrolling on my phone, right? That task initiation becomes that much harder when I've set myself up for all or nothing. I have to clean this entire house until it's spotless, or I'm just going to sit here and give up. And I think sometimes our kids feel like that too, right? That big, long writing assignment is really, really hard to take on. And so I'm just going to avoid it. So that's when we can use this chunking strategy. We're going to just write our topic sentence and give me 3 details that are going to support it. That's all you need to do right now. We can come back and do the editing later. We can come back and kind of clean up our penmanship later. All we need to do is one thing. Sometimes our kids might even need something a little bit smaller. Sometimes it's just, we're going to put our name on the paper and do the first 3, and then we're going to take a break. One strategy that I personally use for myself, and I needed this one a lot when I was working remotely, was the 50-10 rule. I'm going to work for 50 minutes, and then I'm going to give myself a 10-minute break. This is a great strategy for kids who have longer assignments, and maybe 50-10 is going to be a big stretch for an elementary school student. So we might want to do something more like 10-5. So we're going to work for 10 minutes on this task. And when our 10-minute timer goes off, we're going to have a 5-minute break. That makes it a lot easier for a child to get into the work when they know that a break is coming. Using checklists, visuals, work plans, these are things that you're going to see a lot in Montessori. The nice thing about these resources is they're a visual way of keeping us on track. So I don't need to hold all of that information in my brain anymore. I have it in front of me. But it also creates opportunity for reinforcement. So I'm a big checklist user, and I love the power of crossing things off, right? And we want to give our kids that same opportunity. So sometimes we even want to fill up their checklist with things that are really easy that we know that they can already do, because we want to build in that positive feedback to get them working on the task, to get them feeling good and feeling successful. Provide immediate and frequent reinforcement. So again, those big, long tasks that a kid might work for over the course of a week, it's really hard for kids, especially kids that struggle with sustained attention, to keep focused on a goal that's coming that far away. So you might need to think about smaller things that we could give at the end of assignments. Think about things that you're giving away at home as freebies already. So like, if your kids get a TV show every night, how do I leverage that TV show? For me personally, putting on PJs and brushing our teeth is like a nightly struggle. So I'm giving nothing for free. You gotta have your PJs and your teeth brushed before we're doing a show or before I'm reading that bedtime book, because that's our sticky spot. So think about like, what is that hard moment for you in your house, and how can you use things that you're already built into your night or into your day as leverage to incentivize getting those things done. Creating accountability checks, another great thing that we can do. So we do this a lot with students at school, is having teachers kind of circle back more frequently. So coming in to check in on how they're doing. Again, this is a good homework strategy. So instead of come find me when you're all finished, or I'll take a look at it when you're all finished with that homework, it might be you do the first 3 and come and get me, and I want to look at those first 3. Great strategy, because it lets us catch if things have gone off track, right? If you haven't gotten that like tap on the shoulder and it's been 15 minutes and they're still working on the first 3, you know, this is a night where maybe they need a little bit more supervision. I'm going to come and like sit closer. It also lets you check in. Do they know the content? If there are errors that I need to correct, I'm right there to correct them before they practice the wrong thing multiple times. And it's an opportunity for reinforcement. So they did 3, give a celebration. I know this is not very Montessori, but I am a big, big advocate for verbal praise. Your kids, just like we do as adults, we want to feel good. We want to know that other people recognize the work that we're putting in. And I think that this, again, like in speaking to our kids honestly about things that they struggle with, great opportunity to praise them for not just the work that they're doing, but how they're doing it. Hey, this is a tricky task, but you just focused for 15 minutes. I don't think you could have done that 3 months ago. That's awesome. Like, those are the types of things that our kids need to hear a lot. Otherwise, these things that are tricky for them become overwhelming and become obstacles. I've included in here 2 images of ways that we could think about this idea of reinforcement. I love Duolingo. I don't know if there are any other Duolingo users, but it is such a fun way to see the power of reinforcement on an adult. They are giving me nothing. I'm getting no money. I'm getting no big prize. I'm just literally getting a check at the end of the night for doing my lesson, but it means so much to me. Core 5 for any any parents whose children are working on Lexia, they do an awesome job of helping kids visualize their progress. So all of the screens are animated. The kid can see how much progress they've made in the lesson. A lot of online games, learning games particularly, are really great with reinforcement. So definitely something that you might want to look into if you have a kiddo who's struggling with sustained attention. Generally not a huge advocate for games or for screen time, but I think if you are going to use it to your advantage. Use it for things like those tricky learning skills because it has a lot of that embedded reinforcement in it. So the last skill that we wanted to talk about was working memory. So working memory is the idea of retaining information while completing other tasks. Working memory is absolutely huge for academic success because there's so much information that our kids need to know just to execute upon a task. So I'm going to think about writing a paragraph, for an example. To successfully write a paragraph, I need to keep in mind what was my topic so that I don't get myself off track. I need to remember my spelling rules. I need to remember my capitalization rules. I need to remember my punctuation. I need to think about my spacing. I need to think about my letter formation. All of this gets held in my brain while I'm working on that paragraph. So that can be really, really challenging for a kiddo who's struggling with working memory. And then we embed that task itself within all of the ongoings of a classroom. So now I'm making that task just that much more difficult, right? Because it's not just my focus on my paragraph, but my teacher told me once I'm finished with this paragraph, I need to put this away and then I need to come back to my work plan and move on to something else. So now I'm like layering on all of these other things that I'm holding in my brain. This can get really, really tricky. 3 things to think about for working memory is there are 3 different types of working memory. And all of this is going to kind of come together for success for our kids. So the first is auditory working memory. Auditory working memory is hearing something, being able to hold it, and then execute upon it. So this our kids do a lot in class. Teacher gave a direction, I'm holding all of that in my brain, and now I'm executing upon it. Visual working memory. So this example of this would be like looking up at the board and seeing the way that a word is spelled, holding that spelling in my brain, and now remembering it so I can use those alphabet tiles to spell it out on my mat. So this is holding visual information for a short period of time. And then tactile information is actually also stored in our brain. And Montessori is absolutely fascinating in the way that we target tactile information and sensation. But tactile working memory, being that it is something that is stored in memory, when we think about our children who have either hyper or hyposensitivity to tactile processing, we know that that memory formation can be a bit challenging. One example is our children with ADD or ADHD who have difficulty kind of filtering out extraneous tactile information. So all of that is clouding up what is the key pieces of information that I need to hold on to. So how do I take all of this information about working memory and support my children? One great strategy is this idea of repetition, rehearsal, review. So when you give a task to your child, you first want to ask them, say it back to me. So, hey, dude, I need you to go upstairs and I need you to get your book bag and your water bottle before we go off to school. What are you getting? So now I'm asking them to rely on their verbal working memory repeated back for me. Awesome. Where are you going? I'm going up to my bedroom. So I want to help them get into that space of the visual working memory. Now, okay, let me see a picture of my bedroom. Great, go do it. They're going to run up and get it, and you're going to have that opportunity for reinforcement when they come back. So a lot of just asking questions to prompt not just, did you hear me? Were you listening? But have you been able to actually manipulate this information in your head? And are you ready to execute upon that task? attaching meaning. So a lot of strategies that we can use, again, to incorporate some visual working memory. Meaning might be something like you have 3 tasks to complete when you get home. So you are going to put your backpack away, you're going to hang up your coat, and you're going to take out your homework. Tell me the 3 things that you're going to do. What's this one? We're going to put our backpack away. Great. What's this one? The idea here is that I don't want to have to be repeating over and over and over again to my child. I want them to start taking and attaching some meaning for themselves. So now this can be a cue for them. So when I see my kiddo get stuck on that 3rd thing in the sequence, instead of me playing it back and giving them the direction again, I'm going to tell them, hold up your fingers, think about it again. What were they? And I'm going to prompt them to go through it. Chunking information. So we chunk a lot in the classroom, meaning that we are kind of grouping the information or the tasks that we're giving them. When you're thinking about giving tasks at home, it might be, we have 2 things to do in the bathroom to get ready for bed and 2 things to do in our bedroom. 2 things in the bathroom, we're going to wash our face and brush our teeth. 2 things in the bedroom, we're going to put on our PJs and put away our day clothes. So again, I've kind of chunked the information so that I can go back to, what were your 2 bathroom things? And now when I find them kind of aimlessly wandering around their bedroom, oh, remember you had 2 bedroom things to do. What were they? So these kind of attached meaning and chunking information go hand in hand. Developing cues. So I'm big on this one. Songs are a great way to do this. Putting things to rhyme are a great way to do this. We use this a lot when we think about things like letter formation or number concepts. You might have seen your kids come home with some cute letter poems when they were younger. All of these are great ways of developing cues for them to retain information. And then visualize. This is something that we as adults do without thought, is when we're given a direction, we hold it visually in our head. Our kids need practice and they need prompting to be able to do that. So again, kind of going back up to that repetition, rehearsal, review. When you give them a task, like go up to your bedroom, okay, before you head up to your bedroom, close your eyes. Where are you going? Your bedroom. Great. Where are you going to look? Under my bed. Okay, under your bed. What else is under your bed? Make sure that they're really seeing it. Ask them questions that actually prompt that visualization, because that's going to help them to not just rely solely on that auditory piece of information, but now they have a visual component also to help them remember if they get stuck. All right. That is all of the content we have for you, and we came up against the last 3 minutes of our conversation. So unfortunately, we didn't save a lot of time for questions, but Amanda and I are definitely here and would love to hear if you guys have any questions or suggestions. And I'm going to stop sharing so that we can talk like a group.
There are a couple of questions in the chat. I want to take a look at
Awesome.
those.
All right, so going back to some questions that we had earlier. So yeah, Jason pointed out, absolutely. So Montessori is, like I said, a great space for our kids to practice these skills. It is absolutely incredible to see what our children are tasked with and how they rise to the occasion of doing that. Things like writing out a work plan for their day and being able to go back and execute on that work plan. Like, I can't think of a better life skill to prepare you for going out into like the workforce years from now than being able to follow your daily to-do list. That's fantastic. And so Montessori creates a great space for our kids to practice those skills. And for those kids that need more, we just need to make sure that we're meeting them where they're at and kind of scaffolding until they're ready to fly solo with those skills. I can absolutely share a link to this timer. It's called the Time Timer app. And I think it's like a $4 app, definitely worth it. I use it every single day. As far as I know, Lamb does not use Duolingo. We don't have a subscription to it. But I know that the public libraries, I think, oh, somebody just chimed in, public libraries do have subscriptions to some different online programs. Lexia is something that LAM does have subscriptions to. That was the other one that I highlighted as a platform that I think does like a really fantastic job with the reinforcement. And yes, I believe that we recorded tonight's session. And so we will definitely be sharing that out. And then to the last question, have teachers received similar presentations? So Amanda and I are actually in the middle of a learning series with our special education team, where we are going through every one of the 11 executive functions and getting into like a really deep dive on each of these skills and how we want to support them in the classroom and how we want to support them specifically in academics. And our hope is to also be able to turn this around to all of our gen ed teachers next year, not just through our collaboration with our SPED teachers, but also to give them the opportunity to kind of apply their own learning to these concepts too. Great. Well, thank you again for taking your time tonight. We so appreciate you guys coming out. And again, Amanda and I will hang out if anybody has any other questions or wants to share. Oh, and I see a suggestion about sharing other resources. I can absolutely share things that again, like Dr. Barkley has some really amazing resources available on YouTube, some books and some podcasts. Chad, I think it's called Children and Adolescents with ADD, is a fantastic podcast that has a variety of different topics related to ADD and ADHD, which I absolutely love.
Carolyn, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? I need some clarification for that. I think that's Carolyn. When kids get mad question.
Oh, I didn't see it.
When we give verbal praise or even fist bumps, high fives, do you know what that could be about and what to do?
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry.
go ahead.
I would say, like, first thing I would think about is if it's public versus private praise. So especially seeing this like with older students at some point, you know, mom and dad's praise or the teacher's praise becomes less meaningful than what their peers are seeing or think of them. So definitely at some point, kids don't love that verbal praise from the teacher and they want something more private. Sometimes in the moment puts a bit of a spotlight on a skill that they might just be trying out or might be a little bit hard. So maybe even saving that praise for later in the night. Again, like, you know, that moment at bedtime where everybody's kind of winding down might be something to say like, hey, can I share with you something that I saw tonight? Something that I'm really proud of you for. I like to use that strategy also a lot, just asking permission, like before sharing something. Hey, can I show you something that I thought you did great with? And kind of get their permission to praise them. I find that I get more buy-in from kids if they've kind of given me permission first.
Yeah, and I was just going to add another way would be if you saw your students did something really well, instead of just calling it out, it's like, hey, can you help your brother do this as well? And that kind of shows that you're proud of them for it, but you don't directly say it. If you're empowering them to that, then you're showing like, hey, I trust you with that because you showed you did a really good job.
Yeah, so 504 plans and Montessori. Absolutely. I think there are a lot of accommodations that we work into 504 plans around some of these skills. So thinking about sustained attention. So again, that might be, I'm not going to set a kid off for the 3-hour work cycle and come back and check in on them after 3 hours. I'm going to preview with them, hey, I need you to start this activity. I'm going to set this timer and I'm going to be back when the timer goes off. So maybe you and the kid have now set 5-minute timers, and that 5-minute timer helps them to track, oh, my teacher was coming back. I definitely want to make sure that I've started with this assignment before she gets back here. So that's a great accommodation. Building in breaks throughout lessons is something that we use a lot. Kind of adding to what we just talked about with the praise. Sometimes kids don't like when it's phrased as a break. I think it might feel a little bit different to them than what their peers are doing. And so sometimes we need to be a little sneaky about it. So it might not just be, hey, you worked for 10 minutes, now it's time for your break. It could be something like, Miss So-and-so down the hall needs help with the snack. Do you think you could go help with the snack? Or I noticed that all of our pencils are dull. Do you think that you could go over and sharpen some pencils for a second? So that they don't realize that they're taking a break. Breaks, especially for children with ADHD, research has shown that it's almost like they need a little bit of a time out to like regroup and get their energy back, especially for things like sustained attention. So even if a kid is resistant to it, we always try to kind of sneak it in. Those are the 2 504 accommodations that are jumping out at me right now. Amanda, do you have other ones that you're thinking of?
No, I just think extended time, just allowing students to, because you're incorporating those breaks, it's going to take longer for them to get their work done. But that's the one that's standing out the most.
Yep.
Mhm.
Visuals, another one that I think work really great. Again, like let's take some of the weight off of the working memory. So, for example, to go back to that writing task, if I put all of that in a writer's checklist, my punctuation, my capitalization, my spelling rules, things like that, now I've kind of taken the lift off of the child to have to hold all of that information. So visuals, checklists, all of that, great accommodations for kids. Of course.
So just a final comment, a game that you can maybe do in the car to build upon the working memory that I found that was really fun for families is that you can do a quick game of, okay, I'm going to go to the beach. What do I need? And you can take turns, like I'm going to take a towel. Next person says the next option and says, oh, I'm taking a towel. And then they add another thing. So I'm taking a towel and slippers. Next person taking a towel, slippers, and a purse. And so you keep on adding to that. It's a really fun car game. I always do it with my nieces and nephews. So just wanted to throw that out there as an idea.
All right, well, we will be posting this for everyone. And again, Amanda and I are always available. So if you have any specific questions that come up for you tonight about your student or their learning, we would love to hear from you. So don't be shy about reaching out. And again, thank you so much.
Ernestine, I saw your question. There's already made, and we can talk to you about the ones that we have.